Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Speaker.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, this is a special debate called for by the opposition parties so that they might debate the occasion and the circumstances of the decision by John Key, Right Honourable John Key, to resign as Prime Minister effectively next Monday and for there to be new leadership in the National Party and therefore as Prime Minister as well. So it seems a little bit odd, having decided that they would request this time of the House, that these parties then spend it trying to push policies that have been roundly rejected in the last 8 years through three elections, in fact, by voters in New Zealand. Why would we ever imagine that it would be a good use of the House's time to debate the policies of the 2008, 2011 and 2014 elections all over again? Mr Speaker, that's the problem with the opposition in this country. They have no moment where they are in the present. That speech from Materia Ture was nothing but nasty garbage that is not even slightly reflective of how New Zealanders see the performance of the current government, let alone the status that they hold John Key in and the way in which they consider him to be a great leader for this country. Mr Speaker, they went on about so many different things that it's hard to cover them all. I'll try and cover some. But I make the point that if an opposition is going to go from being an opposition into government, then they should stop insulting 50% of the voters who don't think they're up to it and start trying to persuade 50% of the voters that they can offer something a little more hopeful than the dismal rubbish that we've had pouring out of Winston Peters, Materia Ture and Andrew Little this afternoon. Let's just look at a few of these things. Firstly, that rambling speech from the Right Honourable Winston Peters. If that wasn't a request for an urgent transfer to a retirement home, I don't know what it was. Mr Speaker, that was the sort of rose-coloured nostalgia that worked for Mr Peters 20 years ago. It does not reflect modern New Zealand. And that's one of the things that New Zealand First are going to have to come to terms with in the next several months if they're going to be anywhere near competitive in the next election. Because it is that moving on, that recognising the situation of today and finding solutions for today and for tomorrow that John Key has been so very good at. When Mr English spoke, he talked about the Prime Minister's relentless optimism. I've never seen him anything other than optimistic about the future of this country. I've never seen him daunted by a problem that this country has, but I have seen him apply himself and demand the same rigour of others in his ministry to solving some of those problems. So when Materia Ture talks about poverty in this country, where were the Greens for 9 years when the Labour Party did not lift benefit income for any poor New Zealander? That took a John Key government to do that. Where were they around things like the family tax credit? No, opposed to it. Where were they around all of the various types of job creation that comes from expanding trade, that comes from freeing up the way in which people can do business? Nothing. We had high unemployment in 2008. We had an economy that was in severe trouble in 2008. And we had interest rates for people who are in houses in 2008 topping 10.5%. And that apparently was good for poor people. Well, Mr Speaker, that is a disgrace that can be offered as any kind of recipe going forward for the coming election. And then it brings me also to the question that the proposition that Andrew Little put out there, saying Mr Key has failed to house New Zealanders. Well, we've never seen the likes of house building in New Zealand at any time compared to what we've got now. And that's a program that's not propped up by some sort of mad government scheme that says subsidise, subsidise, subsidise. It's a program that enables people to get hold of land, allows building companies to go ahead and do those subdivisions, and is backed by finance packages that people can avail themselves of. In the end, it's all about supply. No one disagrees with that. But how that supply is created is crucially important. And Mr Speaker, the once proud Labor Party claimed through Michael Joseph Savage that home ownership was the big deal and having a home was a big deal. Nowadays, that's only if the government, according to them, lets you have it. That, sir, will not be a recipe that New Zealanders will be impressed with in the coming months. I also want to make reference to the idea that incomes are going to rise should there be a Labor government. One thing John Key has done throughout his tenure as Prime Minister is said if we want basic incomes in this country to rise, then there has to be the economic incentive for jobs to be created and for good wages to be paid. That has meant the relentless pursuit of trade deals. It has meant taking regulation out of our business activities. It has meant finding new markets and encouraging people to diversify the economy. And when we had just this year, sir, the last couple of years, the dairy price falling away, what was the impact on the New Zealand economy? Dreadful as it was for some farmers, it didn't tip our economy up because of that diversification, because of that relentless focus on trying to raise incomes for New Zealanders. And at a basic level, every year, the minimum wage raised under a John Key government. Never happened for 9 years under Labor. Where was New Zealand first? Where were the Greens? And where were the Labor backbench while their ministers were refusing to raise incomes for the poorest of New Zealanders? This, sir, is the record of John Key. He is a very compassionate man, a very pragmatic man. He knows what it's like to grow up in a household that is not advantaged. He knows what it's like to see others with more, but he's never let that get in the road of his drive to either improve himself, his family's lot, and to desire that for all New Zealanders as well. Mr Speaker, we heard them say that under Labor, education will be completely free. Completely free. Well, sir, I think we heard that from Labor during the 1980s, when they introduced the fees for students in tertiary education. I think we've heard it from Labor when they said tomorrow's schools will be some kind of nirvana, where you just walk in the gate, you get conferred with qualifications and you walk out for a wonderful life. Sir, this is a government that has focused on educational achievement. John Key said to his cabinet, we cannot have young people who cannot read and write. We cannot have young people who have problems with numeracy. We have to have a better focus. So, sir, through successive education ministries and his ministers and his particular commitment to that portfolio, we see the PISA results today coming out, the international comparisons for literacy, numeracy, etc., and New Zealand once again on the rise. A bit of a turnaround, a significant turnaround, in fact, from where we were just a few years ago, and largely due to the fact that a government has a right to demand standards in education. That's what's happened, and the beneficiaries are young children. And what we've got over there is all sorts of claims about, oh, it's not good, don't listen to the stats, blah, blah, blah. But if it suits them, they'll use them against you anytime, sir, or us. And I think, sir, they need to just have a bit of a look at that particular portfolio, because their record's not tidy. And then, finally, let me just deal with health. Mr Speaker, there's never been more people getting health care when they need it in this country as there are now. And there's never been a time when the commitment to health dollars has been as strong as it is at the moment. Mr Key, once again, making sure that while there was this focus on having a sound economy that can provide jobs, that will provide bigger incomes for people, still insisting that this government spent in core social services. Mr Speaker, his legacy is a remarkable one. He will be in history, I'm sure, recorded as one of the great Prime Ministers of this country. He is most definitely one of the greatest leaders of the National Party. And while he has now decided to exit the stage, the scene that he has set, sir, the culture that he has put in place will endure, and the fundamentals of what's been achieved under his ministry, his Prime Ministership, will continue and be well regarded and well received by New Zealanders in the coming year.
I call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr.